Two tropical systems developing across northern Australia, one in the Coral Sea, another off Western Australia that could become severe. Both worth your attention this weekend. Let me break down what we're re-looking at, what the models are showing and what you need to know. Starting with the immediate situation. Right now across northern Australia, conditions are set up for tropical development. We've got significant convective activity in the Coral Sea northeast of the Queensland coast. Moisture is building. The monsoon trough is active. And over in Western Australia, remnants of ex-tropical cyclone Koji are reorganising in very favourable conditions. The Coral Sea system is the closer concern for most Queenslanders, but it's the Western Australian system that has potential to become more significant. We'll work through both. First, the Coral Sea. There is a tropical low-pressure system sitting just north of New Caledonia. Convection is bubbling away around it, not hugely organised at this stage, but it's there. This system is expected to intensify and could reach tropical cyclone status early next week. The good news for Australia is that it's tracking northeast away from our coastline. It'll skim the New Caledonian coast before being steered towards New Zealand later in the week. New Caledonia is likely to cop cyclone force winds sometime early next week. Gale force winds across the northern edges, heavy rainfall, big waves. They need to be watching this one closely. Now, while that system stays offshore, it's still affecting us indirectly. The monsoon trough associated with it is pumping moisture across central and northern Queensland. That means showers and thunderstorms continuing through the interior, and that adding to an already serious flooding situation in central Queensland. If you've been following the situation around the Fitzroy River catchment and the central Queensland highlands, you know the flooding has been significant. The Mackenzie River at Blackwater is running extremely high. That causeway that crosses the river is about 5 metres underwater at the moment. Massive volumes of water moving through. And 24 hours ago, while it was still dramatic, it was noticeably lower than where it sits now. More water continues to pour in. The showers and thunderstorms we are seeing across that part of Queensland aren't helping. The silver lining is that we are likely to see only negligible rises over the next couple of days. Water levels should stabilise, but it's been a rough couple of weeks for that region. Looking ahead to next week, the monsoon is forecast to strengthen. When that happens, we're likely to see another tropical low develop in the Coral Sea. Could be just a broad low pressure system, could develop into a tropical cyclone. Too early to say with certainty. The mechanism works like this. The Western Australian system, which we'll discuss in detail shortly, is going to wrap up nicely through the weekend and into early next week. That sets up strong northwesterly winds through the Arafura Sea and into the Gulf of Carpentaria. Those winds connect with the low pressure system near New Caledonia. A broad monsoon trough develops, and from that trough, areas of rotation can spin off and develop into their own systems. This is a common origin for monsoon-based tropical lows in the Coral Sea. Usually they don't get particularly strong. They rebroad, messy, disorganised, but they deliver a boatload of rainfall to northern Queensland. The European model is showing development of a defined low-pressure area between about the 22nd and 25th of January. It takes the system to tropical cyclone status fairly quickly, then tracks it southeast into the Coral Sea. The graveyard, as we call it, that S where most systems end up at this time of year. The reason comes down to the jet stream. Right now, the jet stream is still quite far north. Its influence starts to wear off north of about the Queensland-New South Wales border, but it's strong enough to drag these systems out to sea and push them southeast. When the jet stream sits further south, running through South Australia and New South Wales instead of through the Northern Territory and Queensland, tropical systems have a better chance of approaching the Queensland coastline. That's why it's unusual to see a tropical cyclone make landfall on Queensland before February. This particular system has a slightly better chance than normal because the jet stream is starting to get pushed back a bit. But the most likely scenario is still that it stays offshore and heads southeast. If something does develop, expect it to be broad and messy, not a tight, well-organised system. Tropical cyclone Koji back in late December is a good example. Very broad area of low pressure, absolutely massive as it approached the North Queensland coastline. Tropical cyclone force winds extending more than 100 kilometres from the centre. That is the kind of system we could be looking at here if development occurs. For most of Queensland, this means continued showers and thunderstorms through next week. The monsoon moisture will keep things humid and unsettled. If you are in coastal areas from Cairns down to about the Whitsundays, keep an eye on forecasts. But based on current modelling, a direct coastal impact looks unlikely. Now, Western Australia, this is where things get more serious. We're re-looking at a system with potential to become a significant tropical cyclone, possibly high-end. The remnants of ex-tropical cyclone Koji are currently over the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf region. Over the next few days, this system is going to reorganise and intensify. The environment is exceptionally favourable. Sea surface temperatures are warm, wind shear is low, moisture is abundant. You can see massive convection over the Kimberley region. Before January, you'd typically see clear skies over the Indian Ocean. Right now, it's turbulent, cloud and thunderstorm activity everywhere. This system is going to have very favourable conditions to work with. The models have gone, to put it bluntly, absolutely bananas with this one. Development is likely Monday or Tuesday as the system moves offshore from the Kimberley coastline. Rapid intensification is forecast in what looks to be a very supportive environment, but there is significant uncertainty about the track and where this system might make landfall. Current modelling shows a range of possibilities. Some models take a weak tropical cyclone into the northern Kimberley. Others forecast a moderate cyclone into the Broome area. And several models are calling for a strong, potentially severe tropical cyclone into the Pilbara coastline around Karratha or Port Hedland. All of these are currently plausible. Here is the pattern we're re-looking at. The system initially tracks southwest through the Indian Ocean. Then, around Friday the 23rd of January, it makes a sharp U-turn back towards the Western Australian coastline. The reason for that U-turn is a weak low-pressure system that'll be sweeping through the Great Australian Bight on Thursday. That low will brush southwestern WA and begin to pull the tropical system into its influence through Friday and Saturday. Where the tropical cyclone is when it makes that U-turn will determine where it makes landfall. If the U-turn happens earlier, we are looking at a potentially weaker system coming ashore further north, maybe the Kimberley coast. If the U-turn happens later, the system has more time over open water to intensify and landfall would be further south, likely the Pilbara. Based on what I am seeing in the models right now, my assessment is that the U-turn is more likely to happen later rather than sooner. That would present a risk of a stronger tropical cyclone making landfall in a more southerly location, Karratha or Port Hedland. But that S, just one interpretation. The uncertainty is extremely high at this stage. The forecast models are showing a pretty even split. That tells you everything you need to know about confidence levels. They re-low. Typically, I prefer to wait until a system actually develops before making specific track forecasts. See whether it's going to be compact or broad, how it's moving, how quickly it's intensifying. But because this system has potential to become quite strong, particularly if it tracks into southwestern areas, I think it's worth flagging now. If you live between Exmouth and Coonabarra, you need to be checking the forecast every single day. I am not saying panic. I am not saying cancel plans or make major preparations yet. Don't rush to the shops. The system hasn't even formed, but you need to be monitoring this closely. What we're looking for over the next few days is consistency. Are the models showing the same solution run after run, same location, same intensity, same timing, or are we seeing wild variations? One run showing an Exmouth landfall, the next showing Broome, Category 5 one day, Category 1 the next. Those variations are inconsistencies. They indicate an uncertain forecast. But if we start seeing run after run pointing to the same part of the coastline at the same intensity and the same time frame, that's when confidence increases. That's when we can start making more definitive calls. That's likely to happen sometime early next week when the system begins developing into a tropical cyclone offshore from the Kimberley and Top End coast. Same situation applies to the Queensland system. We wait and see where development actually occurs, whether it becomes a broad rainfall depression, a tropical low, or a fully fledged cyclone. A lot of details still need to be determined. Let me put both of these systems in some historical context. For Western Australia, if this system develops as forecast and makes landfall as a severe tropical cyclone in the Pilbara, it would be significant but not unprecedented. The Pilbara coast is no stranger to severe cyclones. The region is built to handle them. Cyclone season preparation is part of life up there. But for areas further south that don't deal with cyclones as frequently, a strong system would be more concerning. Communities further down the coast, closer to Exmouth, see tropical cyclones less often. Infrastructure isn't always designed to the same cyclone-resistant standards as UD, find in Karratha or Port Hedland. The key here is not to underestimate it, but also not to overreact. If you are in the potential impact zone, now is the time to review your cyclone plan. Make sure loose items around the property are secured or can be secured quickly if needed. Check your emergency supplies, water, non-perishable food, batteries, torch, radio. The basics. If you've got livestock, think about shelter options. If you're in a caravan or temporary structure, identify where you will relocate if a cyclone warning is issued for your area. For Queensland, the Coral Sea system looks more like a rainfall event than a wind event. The flooding in central Queensland shows how serious rainfall can be. The Fitzroy catchment is already saturated, river levels are high, any additional heavy rainfall could cause problems. Many of you remember the 2011 Queensland floods. Brisbane inundated, Toowoomba hit by flash flooding, 17 lives lost in the Lockyer Valley. That was a summer of relentless rainfall across Queensland. Catchments couldn't absorb any more water. Rivers broke their banks. It took months to recover. We're not looking at that scale of event right now. But the principle is the same. When catchments are already saturated, additional rainfall has nowhere to go except into rivers and creeks. Water levels rise quickly if you were in central or northern Queensland, particularly in low-lying areas or near waterways. Stay aware of flood warnings from the Bureau of Meteorology. Don't drive through floodwater. If it's flooded, forget it. That's the official SES message, and it's worth repeating because every year people ignore it and get into trouble. Now let's talk about what the models are actually showing in more technical detail. For the Western Australian system, we're re-looking at the access model, the GFS, and the ECMWF. All three are in general agreement that development will occur. All three show intensification, but they diverge significantly on track and intensity. The access model has been favouring a more northerly track, bringing the system ashore in the Kimberley as a Category 2 or 3. The GFS has been more variable, but recent runs have trended towards a Pilbara landfall as a stronger system. The ECMWF has been consistently aggressive, showing a severe cyclone impacting the Pilbara coast. When the European model goes aggressive on tropical cyclones, it is worth paying attention. It has been the most accurate model for tropical cyclone forecasting in our region over recent years. Not perfect, but its track record is solid. However, we're still several days out from development. Model skill decreases the further out you go. What looks like high confidence now could shift dramatically as new data comes in. For the Coral Sea system, model agreement is even lower. The monsoon trough is forecast to develop, that is consistent, but exactly where within that trough a low will spin up and whether it will organise enough to become a cyclone is still very much up in the air. The timing looks to be around the 22nd to 25th of January, mid to late next week. But that could shift earlier or later depending on how the broader pattern evolves. One thing worth noting is that we're re-entering the peak of cyclone season. January through March is when we typically see the most activity across northern Australia. Having two potential systems developing simultaneously isn't unusual. Some years we see multiple cyclones active at once across different ocean basins. This year we're in neutral ENSO conditions. No El Nino, no La Nina. That means we're not dealing with the suppressive effects of El Nino that reduce cyclone numbers. But we're also not seeing the enhanced activity that La Nina typically brings. Neutral years are variable, sometimes active, sometimes quiet. We'll have to see how this season plays out. The Indian Ocean dipole is also in neutral phase. That doesn't give us much guidance on what to expect for the rest of the season. We're essentially flying blind on the larger climate drivers, which means paying close attention to individual weather systems as they develop becomes even more important. What does all this mean practically? If you are in Western Australia between Broome and Exmouth, this weekend is the time to review your preparations. Not to panic, but to be ready. Make sure you know where your cyclone kit is. Check that you've got enough fuel in the car and the generator if you have one. If you are on tank water, make sure tanks are as full as possible before any system approaches. Secure outdoor furniture. Anything that could become a projectile in strong winds needs to be tied down or brought inside. Trampolines are a classic problem. Either anchor them properly or disassemble them. If you've got a boat, make sure it's properly secured. Cyclones and boats don't mix well unless the boat is well prepared. For those in cyclone-prone areas of Queensland, similar preparations apply. Even if the Coral Sea system doesn't develop into a cyclone, heavy rainfall is likely. Check your property drainage, make sure gutters are clear. If you've got a creek or river nearby, know where it sits now and what level triggers concern. Glen Innes has been reporting humid conditions. Rain would be welcome there, but humid air masses can produce intense rainfall when conditions align. The recent storms through parts of inland New South Wales and Queensland have shown how quickly heavy rain can develop when moisture is abundant. Up in far north Queensland around Mount Carbine, temperatures have been hitting 34 degrees with 85% humidity by mid-morning. Minimum's not dropping below 28. That's uncomfortable weather. When you're re-sweating through the night and there's no relief, it wears you down. The good news is that when the monsoon properly establishes, you usually get afternoon storms that at least break the heat temporarily. The Gold Coast has been humid as well. That moisture is widespread across eastern Queensland. It is fuel for storms when the right trigger comes along. Darwin saw rain starting around 6 a.m. and it was to looking like slowing down. That's typical build-up season weather. Heavy downpours, then it clears, then more rain. It's uncomfortable, but it's what leads into the proper wet season. Southeast Queensland has been notably dry. Brisbane in particular, that has been a common complaint. The humidity is there, but the actual rainfall hasn't materialised. You've got the uncomfortable conditions without the payoff of decent rain. That S frustrating when dams are sitting lower than you do like. The pattern next week might change that. If the monsoon trough sets up as forecast, moisture will spread further south. That could finally bring some meaningful rainfall to the southeast. But I am not making promises. We'll see how it develops. Out in central Queensland around Alpha, they've been getting rain. Bucketing down, that's adding to the flood situation we discussed earlier. Too much of a good thing becomes a problem. The temperature contrast across the country right now is significant. Far North Queensland sweltering. Tasmania dealing with cool conditions. That is a typical summer pattern for Australia, but it's quite pronounced at the moment. For those asking about fishing forecasts, the unsettled weather across northern waters isn't ideal. If you're already planning to head out, check the latest wind warnings. The monsoon brings variable winds and sudden squalls. Not dangerous if you're already prepared and watching the sky, but it can make for an uncomfortable day on the water. The southeast Queensland dry spell is worth addressing specifically because I know it's been a concern. Why has Brisbane been so dry this summer? The pattern we've had has been moisture flowing into northern and central Queensland, but a ridge of high pressure sitting off the coast has been blocking that moisture from pushing further south. The southeast has been on the edge of the moist air mass, close enough to feel the humidity, but not getting the rainfall. That ridge is forecast to weaken next week. If it does, and if the monsoon trough extends as far south as the models suggest, Brisbane and the Gold Coast could finally see some decent falls. But ridges can be stubborn. They don't always move when the models say they will. We'll know more in a few days. One question that has come up is whether this many messy low-pressure systems is normal. The answer is yes during active monsoon periods. The monsoon isn't a single weather system. It's a broad area of low pressure and convergence that can spawn multiple individual lows. Some develop into cyclones, some just bring rain, some fizzle out completely. What we're re-seeing now is a fairly typical active monsoon pattern. Multiple areas of low pressure across northern Australia and adjacent waters. It looks messy on the charts because it is messy. That is the nature of tropical weather during summer. The key is to watch which of these messy lows start to organise. Most 1T. But the ones that do can develop quickly once they get going. Right now, we've identified two areas with development potential, the Coral Sea and Western Australia. Over the next week, one or both could become tropical cyclones, or neither might. That's the uncertainty we're dealing with. What I can say with confidence is that if you are in a cyclone-prone area, your preparation should already be done. If you haven't sorted out your cyclone kit, secured loose items, checked your insurance and made sure you know your evacuation routes if needed, this weekend is the time. Cyclone season is here. We're going to see more systems develop over the coming months. February, March and April are typically the busiest. Better to be prepared early than scrambling at the last minute when a cyclone warning is issued. For Western Australia specifically, I'll be monitoring this system closely. Daily updates as it develops. We should have much better clarity by Monday or Tuesday once the system actually forms and we can see how it is behaving. Until then, SA watching brief for everyone between the Kimberley and Gascoyne coasts. For Queensland, same story. Watch the forecasts. The Bureau of Meteorology will issue warnings if needed. Don T relies solely on me or any single source. Cross-reference multiple sources. The Bureau has the most comprehensive monitoring network and the official warning responsibility. If you are in central Queensland dealing with flooding, the current forecast is for river levels to stabilise over the next few days. That's good news, but any additional heavy rainfall could change that quickly. Keep an eye on river height bulletins. To summarise, two tropical systems developing. Coral Sea system likely to stay offshore but will maintain monsoon activity across Queensland. Western Australian system has potential to become severe and make landfall somewhere between Broome and Exmouth, most likely the Pilbara coast. Timing looks to be late next week into the weekend. Uncertainty is high on both systems. We need to see how they actually develop. But the potential is there, which means if you're in the impact zones, you need to be ready. Check the forecast daily. Make sure your preparations are in order. Don't panic, but don't be complacent either. Cyclones are serious events. We take them seriously without sensationalising them. I'll have more updates over the coming days as these systems evolve. The Bureau of Meteorology will be your primary source for official warnings. Pay attention to what they're saying. Stay safe. Look after your mates, particularly those in remote areas who might not have easy access to updates. If you've got elderly neighbours, check in on them. Make sure they're re-prepared and aware of what developing. That the situation as it stands. Both systems worth watching closely. More clarity